Hi, my name is Sam Cochin, and this is my analysis of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge Management Plan. So to begin with, of a summary of the purpose, the overall goal of the management plan is create an outline of the purposes of establishing the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge and the different policies, management activities, and procedures that aim to protect the resources and wildlife in the area. The main goals of this plan include conserving the different fish and wildlife populations and habitats, as well as aiming to fulfill international treaty obligations which provide the opportunity for the continued use of resources for local residents and ensure water quality and quantity in the refuge. Resources within the refuge will be specified in each area and be compatible with the purposes of the refuge and will help create opportunities for recreation, ecological research, education, and interpretation. So the plan was drafted by the Arctic Refuge and the Alaska region of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. There's also collaboration with NASA, and the final record of decision was drafted by project team leader Stephanie Brady. Um, Within this management plan, there's many different instances of involving humans within its plans. This involves protecting archaeological and historical sites built and used by indigenous groups, as well as involving local indigenous people in the area to help create management plans. The management plan also discusses human safety, transportation, access, visitor use, and recreation as well. And there's many incentives to involve humans within its plans, since it helps establish historic and heritage values, recreational values such as hunting and backpacking, and allows the different indigenous groups within the area to continue their traditional resource uses and relationships with the land. Um, there may be conflicts of interest that come along with the fact that there's a lot of exclusion of certain demographics, since there's no established roads, trails, or facilities at the site, which may discourage a lot of visitors from going. But the refuge encourages that their visitors be very prepared and self-reliant. And this aligns with the goals of the plan, which is to follow the symbolic value of the refuge as being as part of the last great wilderness, and it allows prepared visitors to explore the land that has been mostly untouched by man and to help preserve this site for future use. So the main goals of the Arctic Refuge include keeping the ecological processes free from the intent of altering the natural order of fish and wildlife population dynamics, and to preserve the different wilderness values and characteristics, as well as documenting and protecting ecological functions and the natural flow regimes within the refuge, as well as addressing concerns about actions that may affect cultural resources and the rights of local indigenous groups. The plan also aims to provide opportunities for wildlife dependent and associated recreational activities. The effects of climate change are also part of the goals and will be evaluated for research and traditional knowledge and will be considered when making future management decisions. This includes research as being a part of the goals as well, and is used to help support the goal of the refuge as being a recognized benchmark for a functioning Arctic ecosystem. Uh, Cultural resources are also documented and protected to help allow visitors and local communities experience the relationship between the people and the environment. There's also outreach information, which is there to help educate guests. Um, and the refuge has a vision statement, which is to protect the untamed Arctic landscape and to sustain ecological diversity, protect traditional cultures, honor the land, wildlife, and indigenous groups, and as well as to pass the land on to future generations. There's not a lot of management interventions in place due to the refuge adopting a non-intervention approach, which allows the natural ecosystem to occur naturally. Different natural systems will be allowed to adapt and evolve. Biological services will be monitored, and effects of climate change will be studied and considered when making management plans. And with the non-intervention approach, managers will avoid any actions that may resist the effects of climate change. Um, Due to this, allowing the natural systems of the area to adapt and change to altered climatic conditions. And this is due to, since there are many unknowns when it comes to effects of climate change, um, it would be really impractical to implement actions that do resist the effects of climate change due to the scale of the refuge. And they also don't know if interventions could conflict with their special values, and may have consequences for local wildlife, habitats, and indigenous people. Um, Within this plan, there's a strategy of avoiding direct manipulations of the environment, as well as creating management actions that reduce non-climate related stressors that can be influenced by the refuge. So within the refuge, there's many different scientific studies and research being conducted on site, which range from studying biological and ecosystem services to cultural and paleontological studies. So refuge biologists will document native species and habitats and monitor and track the status and trends of local wildlife. And this data is evaluated by managers to be used to understanding potential threats to the diversity of the area and understanding population sizes and movements of local wildlife. Uh, Paleontological studies are also performed to help evaluate cultural resources to be protected and managed. Um, Archaeologists and different paleontological researchers conduct research at the refuge and collect data about threatened sites or culturally significant sites. The refuge also collaborates with NASA, which they conduct research using suborbital rockets being launched at the Poker Flat Research Range. Here they use sounding rockets to help study the aurora borealis and the interaction between the sun and the Earth's upper atmosphere. And data collected from these rockets can be useful in understanding changes in the atmosphere, as well as understanding the health of the atmosphere and the effects of climate change. So the plan addresses the possibility of cultural clashes or disagreements. They follow the consultation and coordination with Indian tribal governments executive order, which established guidelines for all federal agencies and how to have meaningful consultations with local indigenous groups. And in 2012, the policy was added that requires that the ANCSA corporations must be consulted with actions that may have direct effect on Alaska Native corporations, and this does increase the collaboration between federal agencies and the Alaskan people, but it may create conflict between the interests of indigenous people and government officials when determining how a resource may be managed. So the management plan includes the consultation with these groups as an important aspect and will be included when preparing management plans for areas near tribal lands or changes in the management of the use of resources. Communications, another big part of discussing current and future research, monitoring, and management with the different indigenous corporations and groups. There's also the fact that many of the communities within the Arctic Refuge have low-income households with high levels of unemployment. And the refuge sees that it's important to preserve the traditional and cultural uses of the land to help with the health of these people. So the revised management plan associates with environmental justice. And so to make sure that none of the proposed alternatives that they have would place a disproportionate weight on low income or minority populations. There are different factors that may be acting as a barrier on the site. There are no roads or developed trails or public use cabins within the refuge, and there's no plans to develop or construct any of these since it goes against the goal of preserving the unaltered character of the refuge, which can make it difficult for most of the demographics of visitors to actually come there, since there are no accessible trails or roads to use. Um, since the refuge does want to save their have the opportunity for exploration and adventure for a group of extremely prepared visitors since they want them to experience the unaltered landscape that they have to offer. Another factor is the dangerous conditions in the refuge that many people may not be experienced enough to actually survive in the worst case scenario. So they do have special designations and outreach programs to help people be able to survive or understand what they're going to be going into if they do want to explore the landscape there. There are different demographics involved, such as researchers, prepared visitors, local groups that do use resources on site, and staff that are involved in the refuge. There are different non-human species that are connected with the site. There's the porcupine caribou herd, which is conserved on the refuge. They are a very iconic symbol of the refuge, and the herd migrates hundreds of miles throughout it, and they play a very important part of the ecosystem. They're also very important to the Gwich'in people, which is an indigenous group in the area, since caribou is a very important food source for them, since it makes up 80% of their diet by weight. Um, these caribou have been a resource for them for hundreds of years, and their calving grounds are considered sacred grounds. Um, there's also the polar bear, which is protected. The refuge is an important site for their denning habitats, and they are also friend species, so it's important to manage the refuge so these polar bears are still able to come to these sites, so they're able to raise their young in healthy dens and habitats. Polar bear activity has been increasing in the area, and that comes with increased people coming over to see or to have polar bear viewing. So there's a lot of management involved in protecting humans and polar bears when polar bears do move towards communities, which increases visitors coming to view these polar bears. So to conclude with, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge is an extremely well-developed and detailed plan that elaborates upon multiple aspects of the goals and priorities of the refuge. And even with the difficulties of managing such an expansive piece of land, the refuge explains every aspect of its management and how the different aspects help protect local wildlife resources and nearby indigenous communities.